ain't sorry. Like, niggas die every day. Like, he was rapping about it, all type of shit. So I ain't sorry about it. Bro.
One of the people connected to Pop Smoke's murder just turned 20 years old. 20. And listen, the way this man is carrying himself right now, the things he has been saying out loud, the things he has been doing since walking free, I swear to you, I am not exaggerating here. What you are about to hear is genuinely going to make your blood boil. And for a lot of people who truly loved Pop Smoke, people who grew up with his sound running through their headphones, people who felt like every single record was speaking directly into their own life. This is going to hurt because it is that disrespectful. It is that out of pocket. It is that level of shameless and brazen. But here is the part that actually broke the internet wide open. This man has been receiving death threats non-stop. Relentless. From fans, from people out in the streets, from people who do not even follow rap music closely, but heard what happened and still could not shake the feeling. And you want to know why this anger refuses to die down? Because of something he did after his release that crossed a line nobody thought could be crossed. Something so shocking that even people who never listened to a single Pop Smoke song felt genuinely sick watching it. And it does not stop there. On top of everything else, this man has reportedly been mocking Pop Smoke's memory, mocking his mother, a grieving woman who lost her child, doing it casually like none of it ever happened. Like he was not part of taking one of the most promising young voices in music away from us forever. Like millions of people across the entire world are not still carrying grief for someone they never got the chance to meet in person, but felt like they truly knew through every bar, every ad-lib, and every deep Brooklyn growl left behind in every record. So today we are going all the way into this story. We are talking about who this man really is, where he came from, what the streets already knew about him, what role he played the night Pop Smoke was killed, how he and his crew were finally caught, how he walked away with what a lot of people are calling one of the most infuriatingly light outcomes the justice system has ever handed down in a case this serious, and exactly what he has chosen to do with that freedom since he came home. Stay locked in from the very beginning to the very end because every single part of this connects. Let's get into it. All right. First things first. The name at the center of this is King Vermont Rascal. That is what he goes by. He also goes by the name Blockstars Online. And disturbingly, he has built himself a real online following off the back of that very name, which is already an uncomfortable thing to sit with once you understand the full context of why the world actually knows who he is in the first place. This man has turned his own notoriety into a platform. He has turned being connected to Pop Smoke's death into an entire online lane for himself. And that right there is a significant part of why people cannot let this story rest. King Vermont grew up in Los Angeles, and if you know anything about that city, you know the neighborhoods carry enormous weight. The blocks carry history that stretches back generations. The gangs operating in those areas have roots going back decades, and that culture is deeply embedded in how young men in certain parts of LA are raised. How they move, how they think, who they trust, what risks feel normal, and what kind of future they genuinely believe is available to them. That environment shapes everything, and for a lot of young people who grow up inside it, the pull toward that life starts early and runs deep. King Vermont has openly claimed ties to the Hoover Criminals, one of the most notorious, most well-known, and most active gangs across the entire Los Angeles area. The Hoovers trace all the way back to the 1970s. They have carried long-running conflicts with rival sets throughout decades of LA street history. Their name alone gets instantly recognized in any serious conversation about that city's street culture. And claiming Hoover is never something people do lightly, not in the environments where that affiliation brings real daily expectations and real consequences attached to it. Based on everything publicly reported and everything King Vermont himself has said across his platforms and interviews, he has never once tried to walk away from that identity. He embraces it fully and completely. He treats it as a core part of who he is, how he carries himself, and how he wants the world to view him. And that deep-rooted commitment to that lifestyle is exactly what set the stage for everything that unfolded on one specific February night in the Hollywood Hills. Honestly, that is genuinely chilling once you really truly sit with it. Because here is someone who, by age alone, should still be figuring out who he wants to become. Instead, he had already thrown himself so deeply into a particular path that he ended up at the center of one of the most high-profile, most devastating crimes in recent music history. Y'all catching this? Because we are only just getting started. Now let's rewind back to February 19th, 2020, because that is the night everything changed forever. Pop Smoke, born Bashar Barakah Jackson, was in Los Angeles at the time. He was 20 years old and riding a wave of momentum that most artists spend entire careers chasing and never even come close to catching. His debut mixtape, Meet the Woo, had already turned him into a certified star back in New York. His second project had just dropped and was pulling serious numbers. He was performing across the country, traveling, taking meetings, and living exactly the life most people who pick up a microphone dream about from day one. He was staying at a rented home up in the Hollywood Hills, a luxury property, a place that was supposed to be a safe, private space for him to rest while out in LA. And at some point that evening, information about exactly where he was staying ended up in the wrong hands. Some accounts pointed to a social media post, one that reportedly showed gift bags with the home's address visible right there on the packaging. Whether it was that exact post or a combination of other publicly available details, it does not change what happened next. The wrong people found out where Pop Smoke was staying that night, and they decided to act. In the early hours of that morning, a group forced their way into the home where Pop Smoke was staying. Court documents.
Pop Smoke was known by some of the biggest names in the business, like Nicki Minaj and 50 Cent. His murder has stunned fans everywhere.
Everybody's talking about it. Police say suspects broke into his home and shot him. The home is on Hercules Drive in the Hollywood Hills.
Fans are starting to show up to pay their respects. Police still don't know the motive behind this shooting, whether it was an attempted robbery or something else, but you can see that they are still out here investigating and searching for suspects.
And the investigation that followed made it clear the people who entered that house included teenagers, young people, juveniles by every legal definition, and King Vermont Rascal was one of them. What happened inside that house is documented, and it is devastating. Pop Smoke was attacked. He was shot. He was rushed to the hospital, and he did not survive. One of the most original, one-of-a-kind voices of a generation was gone forever. Years old, standing at the absolute peak of everything he had worked so hard toward his entire life, and it all ended in the middle of the night, inside a house he was only renting for the week. I am not even exaggerating. Every single time I revisit this part of the story, it hits differently in my chest, because you can put on his music right now, today, and hear exactly what the world lost. You hear someone who was not finished, someone who was just hitting his stride and figuring out the full scope of what he could become. And it was ripped away in the middle of the night by people who broke into a house where he was sleeping. Chat, are we even surprised that people never fully move past this? Because I am absolutely not. The grief surrounding Pop Smoke's death never truly faded. It just went quiet for stretches before something like this drags it right back to the surface. After the murder, the LAPD launched a full-scale investigation, and they were not treating this lightly at all. This was a globally high-profile case, and the department knew the eyes of the entire world were watching closely. Resources poured in immediately. Detectives worked it hard, and they worked it fast. And over the months that followed, the case slowly started coming together piece by piece. One detail that genuinely shocked people as the investigation slowly developed was discovering just how young the suspects actually were. Once investigators finally began pinning down the individuals who had been at that Hollywood Hills property that night, they were dealing with juveniles, multiple teenagers who had collectively carried out a home invasion robbery that ended in a killing. That detail alone added another layer of devastation to an already devastating situation. Now here is the motive detail that hit people in a very specific, very painful way. This was not a targeted hit over personal beef with Pop Smoke. It was not about something he said in a song or some conflict escalating behind the scenes. According to what came out during legal proceedings, this was a robbery. They went there to take things, jewelry, valuables, whatever they could walk away with. And in the course of that robbery, Pop Smoke lost his life. That detail somehow made it feel even more senseless to the people who truly loved him. He was not killed over a personal war. He was killed because a group of teenagers chose his location, broke in, and things escalated to the worst outcome imaginable. The randomness of it, The sheer wastefulness of it, that is a specific kind of grief that people who love Pop Smoke have carried ever since, and it does not ever fade away. King Vermont Rascal and the others involved were eventually identified, arrested, and charged. The case moved through the legal system, and the evidence that surfaced during proceedings was detailed and damning. King Vermont was clearly identified as someone directly involved in what happened inside that home that night. Not standing far down the street, not waiting outside, but inside the house, active, present for what happened to Pop Smoke. His involvement was fully documented, and it was prosecuted. And here is something worth knowing about how they actually got caught. A significant portion of the evidence that helped investigators build this case came from digital sources. Social media activity, phone records, communications between the people involved. These were teenagers back in 2020, where every message, every post, and every call was potentially evidence that could be used inside a court of law. And the irony here is heavy. The same digital world that launched Pop Smoke's music globally also played a direct role in bringing those responsible for his death to justice. Y'all seeing how that connects? Because that detail says a lot about how this generation moves. Multiple arrests followed, multiple charges were filed, and cases were resolved through plea deals and court proceedings. But the outcomes ended up looking dramatically different, depending on one factor above everything else: age at the time of the crime. And that is exactly where a new wave of public anger came flooding in, one that has never fully receded. This is the part of the story that made people the most furious. Because despite being directly involved in the events that took Pop Smoke's life, King Vermont walked away with a sentence that left millions feeling like the system had completely and utterly failed. Not just failed Pop Smoke's family, but failed the culture and failed everyone who felt like this young man deserved real justice. Here is what you need to understand about how juvenile justice actually works in the United States. When someone under 18 commits a crime, even a serious violent crime, even one involving a death, the law in many states prohibits treating them the exact same way you would treat an adult offender. There are sentencing caps. There are different types of facilities they can be placed inside. There are different rules governing what happens to their records once they age out of the juvenile system, and in many cases, those records get sealed entirely. Whether you believe that framework exists for a legitimate reason, or think it amounts to a loophole letting serious offenders escape real accountability, that is a genuine debate, and people land on very different sides of it. But what is not up for debate is the real-world impact it had on this specific case. King Vermont was a juvenile at the exact time Pop Smoke was killed. That single fact completely restructured the entire legal outcome. He was not facing life in prison. He was not looking at decades behind bars. He served time, yes, but the length of that time, measured against the full gravity of what happened and what was permanently taken from the world, struck an enormous number of people as deeply and almost unbearably insufficient. Pop Smoke's mother, Audrey Jackson, has spoken publicly about what this whole journey has been like for her. The grief of losing her son, sitting through legal proceedings, knowing the people involved were eventually going to walk back out into the world and live lives that her child was never going to get the chance to live. Every time she has spoken about it publicly, the world has listened and the world has felt it. Because there is nothing abstract about the pain of a mother who lost her 20-year-old son and then had to watch that pain play out in a courtroom. Social media erupted every single time there was an update on the case, every plea deal, every sentencing report, every new development. The reaction from the public was overwhelming and it was angry. People who love Pop Smoke felt like he had been failed twice over. Once on the night he was killed, and once again when the consequences handed to those responsible fell so far short of what real justice looked and felt like. Gang! All of that grief and all of that anger was already sitting right at the surface. That is the full context for everything that followed. And then King Vermont came home, and instead of laying low, staying out of the public eye and using his second chance to build something, anything that had nothing to do with what landed him where he was, he went in the exact opposite direction. He went online almost immediately after getting out. And the posture he came back with, the energy he brought, the content he put out, none of it suggested a person sitting with the weight of what he had been part of. He came back loud. He came back posting. He came back with an attitude that communicated to the world very clearly, "I am not carrying this the way you think I should be." The first thing that exploded across the internet was the clothing situation. King Vermont was seen wearing hoodies with Pop Smoke's image printed on them. Read that again slowly. One of the people involved in his death, wearing hoodies with his face on it out in public, posting it online where millions could see it. People immediately started asking what this was supposed to mean. Was it a taunt aimed at the fans? A message to the family? A deliberate flex that said, "I am out here free and I am not thinking about any of what happened the way you want me to." Because there is no neutral way to read that image in this context. There is no version of it that lands as anything other than deeply, viscerally disrespectful. The internet reacted immediately, and it reacted hard. Death threats came flooding in fast. Pop Smoke's fan base is massive. It spans the entire globe and it runs emotionally deep. They were not about to scroll past that quietly. They were loud and they were aggressive. And King Vermont, instead of stepping back from the storm he had created, leaned even further into the attention. He kept going. Then came the interviews and the online appearances where he addressed the situation directly in his own words. And what he said, the actual content and substance of what came out of his mouth, is what fully locked in his status as one of the most disliked figures in music culture online. He said he does not regret what happened. He does not carry guilt over the death of Pop Smoke. He has framed the fact that he is free and out here living as something to be proud of. And the casualness with which he said all of this, the complete absence of any visible remorse, is the thing people keep coming back to. Because it is one thing to face consequences and come out the other side. People can process that, even when they feel the consequences were not steep enough. What is significantly harder to process is watching someone exit those consequences and then repeatedly, publicly, loudly communicate to the world that they feel absolutely nothing about what they did. And then on top of all of that, reports began spreading that King Vermont had made comments people interpreted as mockery, not just of Pop Smoke's legacy and memory, but directed at his mother, at Audrey Jackson, a woman who lost her child and has carried that grief publicly, with more grace than most people could ever manage in that situation. A woman who put together her son's posthumous album and made sure his art reached the world. To have someone connected to that loss apparently treat her pain as something to mock broke something in a lot of people online that has not healed since. Oh my God. Every time I sit with this part of the story, it hits differently. Because when you really think about what Audrey Jackson has been through and then place this man's behavior next to it, there are honestly no words that fully capture how out of pocket that is. The death threats have continued ever since. They started the moment King Vermont began showing up publicly, and they intensify every time he does something new that pulls his name back to the front of people's feeds. And look, threats of violence in response to grief and anger do not break cycles. They reinforce them. And that cycle of retaliation is the exact same energy that created the situation we are talking about in the first place. But King Vermont has not taken a single step to bring the temperature down. Every new appearance, every new statement, every time he opens his mouth or picks up his phone to post, it adds more fuel to a fire that has been burning for years now. But here's what I need you to hold on to before we close this out. Because in all of this noise and all of this anger, it is important to come back to who this story is actually about. At its core, who it has always been about. Bashar Barakah Jackson, Pop Smoke. Born July 20th, 1999, in Brooklyn, New York. Raised in Canarsie, a kid who found music and turned a raw, completely authentic corner of Brooklyn drill culture into a sound that crossed every geographic and cultural boundary there was, seemingly overnight. His voice was unlike anything that had ever existed before it. Deep, aggressive, and melodic all at once. A combination that was completely and undeniably his own. There was nobody else who sounded like him. There is still nobody who sounds like him. When his breakout single dropped in 2019, it did not just take over New York. It crossed the Atlantic. It reached artists in the UK and beyond who were inspired by what he was creating. It put Brooklyn back on the map in a way that felt entirely new and entirely earned. Major artists jumped on remixes. Big names were locked in with him. Major labels were competing hard to sign him, And every single bit of that was happening before he was even old enough to legally drink in the country he had taken over. His breakout hit carried a message about aiming high no matter the odds. His debut studio album, put together and lovingly released after he was already gone, debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200 after his death, because the music itself was that undeniable. His mother carried that project across the finish line, and in doing so gave millions of fans around the world something permanent and real to hold on to. That album exists because Audrey Jackson made absolutely sure it did, and that matters. That is what endures. That is what actually wins in the long run. Not the hoodies, not the interviews, not the trolling or the provocations or any of the noise this man has generated since getting out. What wins is his music still running on playlists in 2026. What wins is his breakout anthem still hitting in gyms and cars and videos all over the world, years and years after it first dropped. What wins is a kid from Canarsie whose voice was so specific and so powerful and so completely his own that it found its way into corners of the world he never even got the chance to visit. We will never hear the album he would have made at 22. We will never know what collaborations he would have put together, what sounds he would have explored, what kind of artist he would have grown into over the next 10 or 20 years. That gap between what exists and what could have existed is the loss that never shrinks with time. It is the thing that makes this story hit different every single time it comes back around. King Vermont Rascal is 20 years old right now, the exact same age Pop Smoke was when he was killed. And the contrast between what these two people have done with 20 years on this earth is something that does not need any commentary from me. It speaks entirely for itself. And here is the thing about infamy versus legacy that I keep thinking about every time this story comes back around. Infamy fades, it peaks, it burns hot for a moment, then gets buried by whatever the internet decides to focus on next. Legacy is different. Legacy compounds. Every new person who discovers Pop Smoke's music for the first time, every kid in London or Tokyo or Lagos who stumbles onto his sound and has their mind completely blown by that voice, that is legacy growing in real time. That is something that cannot be trolled away or mocked away or worn away by someone putting on a hoodie for attention. Pop Smoke's legacy is bigger today than it was the year he died. 5 years from now, it will be even bigger still. That is the real difference between someone who built something lasting and someone remembered only for what they took. Rest in peace to Bashar Barakah Jackson. Pop Smoke, Brooklyn forever. Gone way too soon. And look, if this video gave you something today, if it made you feel something real, if it reminded you why this story still matters and why we should never scroll past it and let it fade, then tap that like button right now. It genuinely helps more than you know. Subscribe if you're not already riding with the gang. Drop a comment. I want to know how you're sitting with all of this after hearing the full picture laid out start to finish. Every single comment, every like, it truly means everything, and it's what keeps this channel bringing you real stories like this one. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.